There are basically two ways to respond to outrages that are happening um, in the world, in society, in the news. There, there are two ways of talking about these things, if you're going to talk about them at all. And there's an argument to be made that maybe you shouldn't even talk about them at all. You certainly shouldn't feel yourself compelled to talk about them. You hear all the time people saying things like, well, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. Meaning, if you don't want to have anything to do with the mess that's out there, and you make a conscious effort to detach, that's doing the wrong thing, because you should be a part of it, because they're going to drag you into it anyway. So you should just become a part of the shit show, because they're going to make sure that you're part of the shit show anyway. That's never really sat well with me. I've never cared for that. that entire angle. It seems to be used by people who don't see past a binary. Who don't see past, you're with us or you're with the terrorists kind of mentality. But don't see that there's a third way possible. And there's always a third way. Don't let them tell you that there isn't. You can always opt out. Don't let them tell you can't. And in some ways, it's in many ways it's the thing to do, because it's just such a shit show, and because there are so many people who are just blatantly, or so many forces, I should say, who are just blatantly manipulating or attempting to manipulate you through outrage and fear-mongering, fear porn, all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to be talking about something, if you're going to, there are outrageous things in the news today. There are injustices. There are things that are wrong. And if you're going to address them at all, there's two ways of addressing them. One is to simply complain about the double standard, to say, well, what if this were the other way around? People often do that with anti-white stuff or anti-male stuff. They say, look at this thing they said about men. They say men are this way. What if we turned around and said women are this way? I bet they wouldn't like that. And that's true. The thing is, that's true. Or I pointed out in a recent video how you never hear the mainstream media use the term far left-wing extremist or extreme left, or far left. It's always far right or right-wing extremist, because in their way of thinking, the left, the person who's on the extreme left, isn't extreme. He's just normal. And I remember this goes back to when I would hear people talk about politics in the media, again, in the mainstream media, the way they would talk about politics, even in the 80s. The media types would they would talk about conservative Democrats. Back then there were some actually conservative Democrats that really aren't anymore. But they would say conservative Democrats, but then there was the other side of the coin. There were the liberal Republicans. There were Republicans, people who were part of the Republican Party, who were like in the Northeast predominantly, I guess, but who had all the hallmarks of being liberal, all the stances that a liberal would take. But the liberal Republicans weren't called liberal Republicans by the mainstream media. They were called moderate Republicans. So you had moderate Republicans and conservative Democrats. Again, the way that the nomenclature they used told us everything we needed to know about them, and about how they were framing things, and how, the tacit meaning of what they're saying there is you're only an extremist if you are on the right. If you're on the left, you're not. You're just normal. You're normal. You're moderate. You're so they don't, even though mainstream media has always projected itself as being centrist, it's never been centrist. It's always been left-leaning. Now, that's fine. You can talk about that, or you can talk about how other linguistic not anomalies, but other linguistic inconsistencies, rhetorical inconsistencies, referring to like making fun of short men is okay, making fun of fat women is not okay, and so on and so forth. You can go. There's lots of places you can go with this. It's in a sense very fertile ground, because there are so many ways in which the rhetoric is disingenuous, and it's not even that hard to see. And once you see it, you don't unsee it, and you can't stop noticing it. So all of that is true, but then what are you really doing? What you end up doing is you're bitching about the way they talk about things, or the way they present things, and it just becomes a bitch session. Yes, it's unfair, but you thinking it's unfair isn't going to make them stop doing it, and the people who are taken in by it are still going to be taken in by it. The people who see through it, they're going to see through it, just like you do. So in the end, it kind of all comes out in the wash. I don't know how many minds are actually changed or shaped. I know that they have propagandistic means at their disposal that they use when they deem it necessary. But there's the countervailing force as well that works the other way. And even though they don't own the mainstream media, they have, nobody watches mainstream media anymore. That's true now. That's something that can be said now. That was different from when I was younger, because there was no real alternative media per se back then. That was no easily accessible one. You'd have to get on shortwave radio or do something like that to find alternatives to mainstream media, and that's not the case anymore. Mainstream media's influence has waned considerably. But I think if you're going to be commenting on these kinds of things, you want to, I think it's the most fruitful and the most interesting to just ask questions like, why are they doing these things? How did it get this way? Why is it this way? What are the overarching, like thinking large scale? What are the overarching, what's the overarching agenda? the overarching agenda isn't just to tell straight white men that they're evil, um, and and that when a woman does something rude, you go girl, but when a man does something rude, he should be punched and kicked until he apologizes for his terrible behavior. The question is why? Why are they doing these kinds of things? What's the purpose? What's behind it all? And I've offered my thoughts about that. What I think ultimately what they want to do, because I don't think, much as we may think that the people in these powerful positions, the ones who are responsible for spreading this propaganda, much as we may think that they're where they land is ultimately just being anti-white or anti-male, anti-normalcy, anti-wholesomeness. Yes, those are all true, but what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal, I think, I've said this before, is depopulation. I've said that. I mean, this is something I've talked about a few times, and so that's something to keep in mind when you talk about the fomenting of hostility between the sexes. That's something to keep in mind when you hear them talk about this, that, or the other thing, whatever issue it might be. Directly or indirectly, you'll see the long-term goal would appear to be depopulation, and that's not just depopulation for white people. Even though that's where we see it the most. That's where it's the most visible now. But it's not. It's wanting to depopulate the planet, depopulate the earth, depopulate the realm. Okay, for those of you who dislike my use of the word planet. And as I've said before, everything that they've backed, everything that they've funded, all the propagandistic pushes that they've funded, transgenderism, homosexuality, feminism, on and on down the line. These are all things that are being pushed because ultimately the result will be fewer people. And I think that's what they're after. They want fewer people. They want it's not that they want less of themselves. They want themselves to continue to propagate and basically to rule the roost, and they want to leave enough of us around to serve them, but they just think there's so much there's so much what Margaret Sanger called human weeds, people who are just useless eaters. And the ultimate goal, when you look behind all of the petty stuff, all the stuff that they throw out there into the ether, the culture war stuff, Yes, they're serious. The culture war is serious. Yes, yes, they're nasty. Yes, they're hateful. Yes, all that is true, but that is not their end goal. And I also think that it's really important to see the demarcation point where all of this really began, when all of this just got notched up to 11, where it became this where multiculturalism and radical feminism and anti-whiteism became the norm in the West. When did that all start, really in earnest? And the what I've offered as a thesis, and I've talked about this many times, and it's something that I think, to me, helps to crack the code of what's going on right now, is that it all started right around the year 1990. There were liberals before then, and there was liberal ideology before then, but it was only in 1990, not uncoincidentally after the end of the Cold War. I don't think that was uncoincidental at all. It was only at that time that they really turned their hostility against the native populations of the West and said, you white people, there's too many of you. We need to open up the floodgates and bring in a ton of third world migrants because there's too many of you, and you all need diversity. It's good for you. Diversity is good for you. But what they really meant all along was, they wanted to, they intended this hostility towards everything that's traditional, everything that's good, everything that's beautiful, everything that's dignified, everything about the West that made the West great. They aim to tear that all down. They aim to destroy civilization and put something in its place, this grisly thing that we see slowly taking form before our eyes every day. That's what they're installing in its place right now. And but it's not just creating chaos for chaos's sake. There again is a plan. I believe there's a plan behind all of this. And now I'm a little bit less clear about what that is, but I have some ideas, which I've kicked over from time to time, and it's definitely worth some. I think it's worth some thought. It's things like that, questioning what they're ultimately trying to do, why this stuff is. I mean, why they're attempting this, these kinds of things. Why 5 years ago did they try to get us all to put a substance into our bodies? Why do they have us on this? Why do they orchestrate this scamdemic? What was the end game there? I would say the end game was to get us on the stuff, to get us to put the stuff into our bodies. And again, depopulation, because the stuff in our bodies makes it harder to get pregnant, makes it harder to reproduce. The studies that keep coming out tell us these things. And they were so cavalier about it, weren't they? They were so cavalier, like they were once it was there, once the V was out there, and they said everybody can and everybody should take this. Are you somebody who's struggling with ill health? That doesn't matter. You should take this. Are you a pregnant woman? That doesn't matter. You should take this. It's fine. Your baby will be fine. You will be fine if you take this. Are you a young woman who wants to get pregnant? Take the shot. You'll be fine. And what did we find out, right? Well, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. Young people, young, healthy people, take the shot. You'll be fine. Next thing you know, people, young athletes are keeling over on soccer pitches and basketball courts, and people are dying young suddenly of heart attacks and in record numbers. That's just something that, oh, well, that's just the way things are right now. Must have something to do with global warming. Like anyone believes that. Right. So, I know this has been a somewhat rambling video, but I guess my final point is, if you're going to get into the muck, if you're going to get into the mire, don't just stay on the surface. Don't just say, hey, there's I've noticed that they treat this group differently than they do that group. I've noticed that it's open season on these types of people, but these types of people you can't even say anything about without them calling you racist and sexist and whatever. But it's open season on. It's even open season on white women when they're not doing what we want them to do. It's even open season on minorities when they aren't being the good plantation slaves that we want them to be, and voting the way we want them to vote. So yeah. So don't just point, don't just stay on the surface and notice things. Like, noticing things is good. It's a first step, but then ask why. Why are they doing these things? And what is their end game? Anyway, those are my thoughts.